It is Sunday, June 26, 2022. We welcome you into Fox 5's On the Hill. I'm Tom Fitzgerald. We're going to begin this morning, of course, with the big headline, the Supreme Court. A divided America out in force this weekend after a monumental decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. There are protests as well as celebrations following this monumental decision, ending almost 50 years of federal abortion rights protection in the U.S. We are going to talk this morning live with guests on both sides of this issue. We want to begin our conversation this morning with Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, who joins us live this morning to talk about the Supreme Court ruling. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us. We were tipped off to this decision by that leak of the draft decision. It is now no longer a draft decision. What are you going to do in Congress to dampen the effects of this, which you see as the wrong direction from the statement you put out this past week?
Well, this is something where for the first time, the Supreme Court has taken away a fundamental right only from American women. And it's terrifying for all of us. You know, this is also something where you know, for the first time, the Supreme Court has said that from the moment of fertilization, women have no rights on their own. They only have those rights that the state gives them. This really severely curtails and threatens women's health, security, and well-being, and it's horrifying to so many of us. You know, it should be scary for everybody who is freedom-loving in America. And in Congress, we have moved to codify Roe versus Wade. That needs to go to the Senate, and the Senate needs to get rid of the filibuster in order to protect these fundamental rights. Because it's not going to just stop with abortion. You know, the court has made it pretty clear that they're getting rid of substantive due process, which is a basic right to privacy in our homes and our bodily autonomy, and that calls into question the legality of things like same-sex marriage all across the country, of homosexual, relationships, of sexual relationships outside of marriage, and of things like contraception. So all of these things are now on the chopping block potentially with this court. So we need to act as fast as we can in Congress to codify these laws.
The governor of Virginia has said that he wants to look at banning abortions after 15 weeks. How would that work in a place like Virginia, which for years had kind of vacillated between being controlled by Democrats and Republicans and now is more of a solidly purple state?
Well, there's only one vote preventing that from happening in Virginia right now, and we have legislative elections next year. So, it's entirely possible that he could do that, and it won't stop there either. We'll see these same kinds of trapped regulations coming back, the targeted regulations for abortion providers. Things like waiting periods will come back. Things like transvaginal ultrasounds, I'm afraid, will also come back. So it's very, very frightening here in Virginia. And all the people who said that the court will never overturn Roe versus Wade, it's done it. It's done it now. And, all those people who say that it won't happen in Virginia, it could happen here as well.
There's a midterm election, of course, coming up in November. Democrats have already said that they are going to rally votes around this issue of abortion. But this comes at a time where inflation is at a generational high. Gas prices are soaring. Are Democrats going to completely talk about abortion and only abortion, or any of these economic issues going to be addressed as well?
Of course not. Of course, we're not only going to talk about abortion. I mean, it's very important, but inflation is top of mind for everyone. And in Congress, we've taken steps in the House of Representatives to lower the price of food and fuel, to shore up our supply chains, to help that with the costs at the pump and at the grocery store. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten any Republican assistance with that. They want us to fail. They don't care about the American people. They just care about winning in November. So, we're going to do everything that we can to fight inflation and to bring down those costs for American families. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Congresswoman, one of the concerns from people that live in states right now that are either under an abortion ban as a result of this decision or facing such bans because of triggers that would go into effect after this is whether or not women could be prosecuted in their home states if they travel to locations where abortion is legal. Is that one of the things Democrats in Congress are looking at as far as codifying this to protect women who may travel interstate to have an abortion performed?
Absolutely, as well as those who help them do it. It's terrifying to think that people could be prosecuted for traveling to a state where abortion is legal in order to take advantage of that right. So yes, that's definitely something that we're looking at, and hopefully we'll be passing something in the not too distant future in order to make that under the national code.
There have been frustration from some members of your party that President Biden in particular has not been vocal enough on this issue. He's at the G7 summit right now. Is the White House the lead on this? Who's in charge of crafting the message from the Democratic Party on where it stands from the viewpoint of protecting abortion rights in this country?
Well, we need to move as Congress in both houses in order to codify these rights and make sure that they are enshrined nationally. And that's something that we're doing in the House of Representatives. The Senate will be following suit. We need to put it on the floor and make them vote against these rights. And then this is something that will, I think, motivate people in November.
I guess the question, though, is, are you one of the people who share that frustration? Because, while the president did come out with this statement the other day, a lot of folks have kind of felt on the left that he's not been a leading force in saying clearly what your party is going to do in response to all of this.
Well, we're driving these rules and these laws in Congress. And we're going to keep fighting for those. And, ultimately these laws, we hope will get to the president and he will sign them. And we know that he will. And, I do feel that he is strongly in favor of women's rights to our own reproductive autonomy.
All right, Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton joining us live from Virginia this morning. We thank you for joining us and get your perspective on this from your political viewpoint.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you. Kris Ullman is the president of the Eagle Forum, a conservative group, and she joins us live this morning. Kris, thanks for being with us. You're the president of the Eagle Forum. It's one of the conservative groups that's been fighting for this for a long time. So, if there are 31 states that have now banned effectively abortion or are about to, what have you really won here if abortion is still available in parts of the United States?
Thanks for having me on, Tom. Well, what we have won is that we now have the ability as citizens, all of us, whether we're pro-life or pro-choice, to actually have an impact on what happens in our states, in our communities, and even in our country. Before this ruling came down, the voices of all the American people were silenced by 9 robed justices in D.C. in 1973. Now we have the opportunity not only to reach out to women in crisis pregnancies, but to change the hearts and minds of the American people and let them learn about the immense human dignity and the incredible potential of all human life. All right. So yes, the battle is now in the states. But more importantly, it's a battle that we can all weigh in on. And that is really what this decision in Dobbs has done for all Americans.
So Kris, you have this victory now. What are you going to do with it? Conservatives have fought for this for 50 years now. Are we suddenly going to start hearing conservatives talk more about prenatal care? Are we going to talk about, how we can help mothers who are in a situation?
Absolutely.
What kinds of things are we going to do post-pregnancy from the conservatives now that this decision has been delivered?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about what is going on, what will continue to go on, and what has been going on in the pro-life community. There are about 900 abortion clinics in our country. There are over 2,700 pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. And they don't just provide diapers and counseling. They provide GED assistance, maternity homes, medical care, not only for a woman who is pregnant, but also for women and babies once the baby is born. And we're going to step up our efforts on that. One of the things I want to compliment is in Texas, they have the the Alternatives to Abortion Act, where the governor just committed $100 million for women who are in crisis pregnancies and beyond, including women who put up their babies for adoption and people who adopt babies.
Kris, do you support women being prosecuted who travel out of a state where abortion is now illegal into a state to have a legal abortion?
The pro-life movement does not support prosecuting women. Women are the second victims in abortions. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is educate women about the wonderful potential of the life and let them know that the services are there. To all your viewers today, there are over 100 crisis pregnancy centers in the West Virginia, DC, Maryland area. There are probably close to a dozen in Congressman Wexton's district, maternity homes, pro-life OBGYNs that provide services free of cost to women in these situations. We want to continue these efforts. We know we have to build upon them so that no woman in this situation feels alone. I want them to know that they are not alone and they are a victim in this situation. And we are here to help them. Just pick up the phone and call, and
Kris,
there are services available.
Sorry, but we're running out of time. I want to get to one more thing. The end game here. Is your work done, or will you continue to press for the end of abortion in every one of the 50 states and the District of Columbia? And is that the ultimate goal here from your side?
The ultimate goal is to change the hearts and minds of the American people so that they can see the wonderful potential of unborn human life, and then they will rise up through their voices that the Supreme Court has now given them and put restrictions on abortions because they recognize the great potential. You know, half of the pregnancies that occur in the district end in abortion. That is a tragedy. It's a tragedy in our communities where there's majority population to people of color. We're losing generations of young Americans, and we want to stand up for them. But it begins with changing the hearts and minds of the American people so that their elected officials will hear from them and they will say, you know what, we want to protect life in this country. And we're going to do that now that the Supreme Court has given us the voice back that has been denied to us for almost 50 years.
She is Kris Ullman. She is the president of the Eagle Forum, and she's joined us live this morning to talk about this really remarkable decision from the U.S. Supreme Court this past Friday. Kris, we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we've got much more for you coming up here live on the Hill this Sunday morning. We're going to talk about the primary elections in both Virginia and the District of Columbia. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Fox 5's On the Hill live this Sunday morning. You know, the other big news politically in the DMV this past week are the primary elections in both Virginia and D.C. Maryland's having their primary elections next month. But we wanted to talk about some more about this. Robert McCartney, well-known friend of the program here, a long-time correspondent for the Washington Post. He now does the Think Regionally podcast with the Metropolitan Council of Governments. Well worth your time. Bob, good to see you again. We thank you for
Great to see you, Tom.
Being back here with us. We want to start in Virginia because these, Bob, are two of the most really focused on congressional elections in the country right now. Abigail Spanberger flipped this seat when she first got into Congress, but now all eyes are on this district. What do we know? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is a swing district. It's the 7th district. It includes Prince William County. Spanberger took it away from the Republicans in 2018 when the Democrats seized control back from the Republicans in the House. Now she faces a challenge from Yesli Vega, who was just nominated by the Republicans. She's a Prince William County supervisor. This district is definitely a swing district. It could definitely go either way. I think Spanberger has a slight edge. It's a little bit more Democratic than some of the other swing districts. And Vega, although she seems like a very attractive candidate, a Latina woman in Prince William, which has a lot of Latinos, she's pretty Trumpy, or at least has seemed to be pretty Trumpy in a lot of ways. So I think Spanberger may have a slight edge there, but it looks like a Republican year, and it could certainly go to the Republicans.
And we know Spanberger is one of those Democrats who's been voicing displeasure with her own party in ways because she says, look, I'm in a really tough spot here, and she's been concerned about this. Let's move on to the 2nd district in Virginia. Elaine Luria is also one of these Democrats that are very closely looked at. What do we know about State Senator for Jennifer Kiggins right now?
Kiggins is a state senator. She's very well known. She's not, she seems to be a less radical conservative, I guess, compared to some others. Luria, of course, is a very centrist Democrat. So you've really got sort of a centrist liberal versus a somewhat centrist conservative in this district, which is around Hampton Roads. I think Luria faces a big challenge. She nearly got knocked off 2 years ago, and I think it's going to be a very tight race.
We also want to mention Don Beyer, Congressman of Virginia, also was victorious in a Democratic primary challenge there, but Beyer looks to be a solid bet for re-election.
Oh, yeah, that's a very Democratic district.
Absolutely, in November. Let's go over to D.C. because the mayor of the District of Columbia is on the verge of doing something historic, a 3rd consecutive term as mayor. Now, she had 2 challengers, Councilman Robert White, Councilmember Trayon White. Some people are making points about the fact that Bowser didn't absolutely trounce her opposition. How much does that or does that matter? How maybe dissatisfied some people in her own party are?
Well, I think there's more wariness about Bowser now than there was 4 years ago, and she faced hardly any opposition at all, and I think won by 70 points. But she still won quite comfortably. I mean, she won by 8 points now, according to the latest results. She carried 7 out of 8 wards. She won, as you said, a 3rd consecutive term. The only other person who's done that is Marion Barry. It's in the Democratic district. It's almost certain she'll win in the general. So I think that she did. There are signs, of people being tired with Bowser, but she still won pretty easily and pretty clearly across the district.
We're real close. We have about 30 seconds left. But did having 2 primary opponents help her because it divided the anti-Bowser vote?
Definitely. I mean, I think that if only one of especially if only Robert White had run, he did much better than Trayon White, then I think he might have picked up a lot of people who voted for Trayon, and she would have had a much closer time.
Either way, a resounding victory for the mayor of the District of Columbia, well on her way to a 3rd term. Bob McCartney, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Tom.
Good to have you back in house. All right, well, as we continue this Sunday morning, we've got much more for you. We're talking with a law professor on the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling on both guns and abortion and where the court goes from here. Fox 5's On the Hill continues live right after this. Welcome back to Fox Eyes on the Hill Live this Sunday morning. You know, the decision by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade has had wide implications for people who have strong opinions on both sides of this issue. I want to take a closer look, though, at the legal decision and what's really going on inside the Supreme Court right now. Jonathan Adler is a law professor at Case Western University, joins us live this morning. Jonathan, talk to me about the machinations of what's going on in this court right now. You've got these three justices who were named by former President Trump. Obviously, you know, Clarence Thomas was a big voice in this. What can we say about where this court is now moving forward? Because there are very big concerns past abortion about things like gay rights and other things that have been granted over the last few years that may be in jeopardy now.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. First, there's certainly a clear conservative majority on the court, a majority that does not depend upon Chief Justice Roberts for the fifth vote. And that's certainly quite significant. It means that in cases that we think about as breaking down along liberal conservative lines, the liberal justices need to attract two of the conservatives, not just one, to prevail. In terms of going forward, I think a lot of attention has been paid to Justice Thomas's solo concurrence, where he reiterated a position he's had for a long time. Number one, that any constitutional decision that was wrongly decided should be overturned, period. And that if there are unenumerated rights in the Constitution, they are not found in the Due Process Clause, which is what Roe and Griswold and other cases have been based on, but are instead to be found in the Privileges or Immunities Clause, which is a separate clause of the 14th Amendment, which might require a different analysis. So he reiterated those points, but he did so by himself. And Justice Kavanaugh also wrote a concurrence, which I don't think has gotten as much attention, which pointed out that for the rest of the court, the question of overturning a precedent isn't just about whether or not a prior decision was wrong. It has to have been egregiously wrong. There have to not be reliance interests of the sort that are, say, created if people get married and believe they have a lawful marriage. And the decision has to not merely, the error of the decision has to be having kind of broader effects. It has to have ripple effects that affect other areas of the law. It's hard for me to see how more than one or two justices believe that some of these other decisions like Obergefell satisfy all of those criteria, whereas for Justice Thomas, only the one criterion of it having been wrong is enough.
But, you know, for 50 years now, we had seen that justices who were nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court would go to their confirmation hearings, be asked about Roe v. Wade, and then have them come back and say during their testimony that Roe v. Wade was settled law. If Justice Thomas, now coming after this decision, is pointing a finger in the direction of some of these other things, don't they have the votes right now on this court to make it happen?
No. I mean, again, Justice Kavanaugh made very explicit they don't. Justice Alito's majority opinion for the court made very clear that the considerations for those other cases are different. If you go back and look carefully at all those confirmation hearings, what they've all said is that a precedent is a precedent, and a precedent is settled law until it is overturned, and that there are certain criteria you are supposed to use. And all of the sitting justices, all of the Trump nominees, identified the criteria that the court used in this case, and which, again, I think there are distinctions. I mean, in the case of, just to use gay marriage, for example, what we call reliance interests, the fact that people have made investments and decisions, ordered their lives, structured their lives around the law being a certain way, that's the sort of thing that courts care a lot about when changing the law. And Justice Kavanaugh, who would be the necessary fifth vote, made very clear that's a separate question than abortion, which has been the focal point of controversy over judicial confirmations for 30, 40 years. I mean, it really is a subject matter or a question that plays out differently legally than all the others.
We had a Republican senator this past week tweet out that Brown versus the Board of Education might be one of those cases that the Supreme Court should look at. That opened a lot of eyes. But
that's a misreading of that tweet. Senator Cornyn
How so?
Senator Cornyn was responding to a tweet by former President Obama that said the problem is that the Supreme Court is overturning a precedent that's 50 years old. And his response was now let's do Brown and Plessy, because Brown versus Board of Education overturned a precedent that was even older than Roe versus Wade. What Senator Cornyn the point he was making, which is a point that's made in the Justice Alito opinion, is that the age of a precedent doesn't tell us anything about whether or not it should be overturned. I think we all agree that it's a very good thing that Brown versus Board of Education overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. And the fact that Plessy versus Ferguson was 60 years old wasn't a reason to keep it around. It was wrong the day it was decided. If anything, it took the court too long to overturn it.
One thing we've learned this week, precedents, as you just said, are only precedent until they're struck down.
Yes.
Jonathan Adler joining us live from Case Western University this morning. We appreciate your time. That's going to do it for this week. Fox 5's On the Hill coming up at 9 a.m. here on Fox 5. It's Fox News Sunday. Martha McCallum in the host chair this week. Her guests include Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and from Georgia, Stacey Abrams. We thank you so much for your time. We'll see you back here next Sunday, live on the Hill.